The official Horizon cookbook, Taste of the Seven Tribes, is out now. And with so many good real-life recipes to choose from inspired by the Horizon universe, what better time to talk about food in the game and determine which foods, if any, are actually worth using. Hey everyone, I'm Chaz. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you brought your appetite because today we are going to be talking all about food in the Forbidden West. Now look, I'll be the first to admit, I probably didn't use food at all on my first, second, and maybe even third playthrough. And I think we can all agree that there is certainly a lot of room for improvement in the way that food is incorporated into the overall gameplay. And trust me, I want to get into all of that. But before I do, I want to talk about some things that make food fun and useful. Now, usually when you make a video like this, you're talking about the best. What are the best foods in the game? But since foods mirror the different skills that you acquire throughout the game, it's really hard to talk about the best because that's really dependent on the skills that you like using and the skills that are required to complete a certain task. So instead of talking about the best, let's talk about 4 scenarios where food is actually pretty useful. And along the way, we'll talk about some best practices for using food, ways I think food can be improved, and some things I hope to see in Horizon 3. But let's kick things off counting down from number 4, which is that not only does food grant you a specific passive boost, but each food item also gives you back a portion of your health and stamina. Now this one might seem obvious, but it's still worth mentioning because there are some things about using food that make it a really interesting and effective way for restoring health. And in some ways, I actually prefer it over just using potions. So just like some of the other items in the game, like weapons and armors, food has different rarity types: common, uncommon, rare, and very rare. And the rarity type of the food item determines how much health and stamina you get back. Common and uncommon gives you back 25% of health, rare gives you back 50%, and very rare gives you back 75%. But unlike armors and weapons, you can pick up very rare food items pretty early on in the game. Cooks in Chainscrape, Barren Light, and Plainsong, which are some of the first settlements you gain access to, all sell very rare food items, and some of them aren't really that expensive. For example, you can pick up spicy beanweed morsels in Plainsong from materials that you can basically just farm for outside of the settlement. And because the health you get back from food is percentage based and not a set amount like with a potion, this can be a pretty significant health boost for both new and experienced players. And similar to potions, if your health is already full or close to full, food will allow you to overheal, which essentially gives you a second health bar. This is super useful when playing on harder difficulties like ultra hard, or if you're just stuck at a certain part in the game and you need a little help to get past it. But when it comes to using food for health, there are a couple of gotchas that you'll want to be on the lookout for. And first, let's talk about local stew. Local stew is the only common food item in the game and something that you can purchase from any of the cooks. It increases your max health by 20%, but it doesn't overheal. If your health is already full, it'll increase your max health and then fill up your health bar to cover the difference, but it won't go any higher than that. And then there's also foods that give you low health passive benefits, like low health defense or low health range. These ones don't restore any of your health, which just makes sense, right? I mean, if the food healed you, it would basically negate the benefit you get from being in low health. But these foods also don't put you in low health or induce the low health state. So in order to take advantage of the passive boost, you have to either be in low health already, get there naturally throughout the course of the fight, or use a Valor Surge like the Defy Death Valor Surge, which induces the low health state. But I would say in general, having a few food items on hand, no matter what it is, just to help get you through some of those tough spots in the game is still a pretty good idea. Next up at number 3, let's talk about Mildriff and Mildriff's quest. Because this side quest is designed to be sort of a general introduction to food for most players in the game. So Mildriff is an NPC that you meet pretty early on at a tavern in Chainscrape, and this poor man has been absolutely bullied into oblivion by Alvin and his goons, but you, being the savage but compassionate Nora warrior you are, can help him out. The quest itself is pretty straightforward. Help him retrieve a few items so he can start cooking again. And once you complete his quest, a couple of different things happen. First, and most importantly, you help Mildriff get the ultimate revenge on those that have treated him unfairly.
When I made his meal, I used 3 pinches of salt instead of 2.
Each journey begins with a single step, I guess.
But aside from that, you also get 1 free food item from Mildriff as a reward for helping him out, access to him as a cook so you can go back to him anytime in the future, and you also get access to the food item Mildriff's Treat. Now this is another pretty early game, very rare food item that isn't too expensive to buy, and the passive boost you get is +2 melee damage. And again, even if you're not necessarily into the passive boost itself, it can still be worth picking up these very rare food items just for the health benefits alone. But I would argue that melee in the early game is probably where it's most effective. You're not yet really fighting the large heavyweight machines, and you don't yet have the best armors and weapons. But this is also a good spot to talk about the duration of the food effect and how long the benefits from food last. Well, the duration of the food effect depends on your food duration skill level. By default, food lasts for 3 minutes, but you can upgrade it with skills in the Trapper skill tree to either level 2 or level 1, which will increase the duration to either 4.5 or 7.5 minutes. Now 7.5 minutes in this game is an eternity. Definitely longer than most machine fights or boss battles. But if you want more, there is an option to upgrade the skill even further to level 3, through the +1 food duration skill on the Karja Trader armor, which gives you 10 minutes, or the +2 food duration skill on the Tanakh Sky Climber armor, which will give you a full 15 minutes. But again, for me, 7.5 minutes is plenty, and you really don't even need to go that far out of your way to get there. Just upgrade through your skill tree naturally, and you'll get to the +2 food duration skill. So speaking of armors, that brings us to scenario number 2. Something else that's cool about food is that not only do the boosts you get mirror the skills from your skill tree, but they also mirror some of the skills that you can acquire through the different armors and weaves. So it can save you from having to invest time and resources into upgrading a certain armor just to gain access to or level up a particular skill. So for example, the Norse Sentinel is a pretty good early game armor and has some useful skills when fully upgraded, like +2 concentration plus and +2 stamina regen. But in order to upgrade it, you have to farm parts from Klostriders, which you don't encounter until about midway through the game. So instead of waiting, you can eat foods like Bitter Brew Boar or the Sun-Seared Ribs that increase your concentration, and foods like Meat in the Middle that increase your stamina. Now this will basically give you the same effect, but without needing to upgrade your armor in order to get there. And even in the later game, legendary armors can be really expensive to upgrade. So if there's a particular skill you want, like +2 Resonator buildup, but you don't want to farm Apex Stormbird Hearts in order to get it, you can purchase a food like Beanweed Bites. Now another one of the things that I really appreciate about food is that it's designed to help you level the playing field, especially early on in the game. For example, uncommon and rare foods give you +3 of a particular skill, whereas very rare food items give you +2. And you might be wondering, why wouldn't the higher rarity food give me more of this skill? And that's where things start to get a little bit interesting, because skills are capped out at level 4. And if you go over that, you're basically wasting part of the skill that you could be dedicating towards something else. And early on, you're much more likely to be at level 0 for a skill or at level 1, so having +3 will help you maximize that skill a lot more. Whereas later in the game, it's more likely that you'll be at level 2 or 3, so you only need +2 at the most to get max level without that skill being wasted. Okay, and that brings us to useful food scenario number 1, which is that food gives you the ability to experiment with different builds or playstyles that you might not yet want to fully commit to or don't yet have all the required skills to commit to. So for example, a low health build is probably one of the more powerful builds in the entire game. But in order to successfully pull it off, there's a couple of skills you probably should max out to level 4. Skills like low health ranged, low health defense, and low health melee. And for most players, you won't unlock those skills until pretty late in the game. But if you want to just test it out, or there's a scenario where you think it'll help you get past a certain point in the game, you can purchase foods like Fruit on Fire, Grazer's Bounty, or Brew Battered Wedges. Now unfortunately, these food boosts don't stack. So if you eat Fruit on Fire for the low health range skill, and then you eat Grazer's Bounty for low health defense, the Grazer's Bounty will override the Fruit on Fire. And this is probably one of my main complaints about food, but let's table that for now and we'll come back to it in a second. Now the Trapper playstyle is another one that can be pretty useful, especially when going through bandit camps or if you're just trying to quickly farm for some machine parts. But you might not want to go all in on acquiring the Trapper skills. But you can use foods like Fireclaw Stew to increase your trap limit, or you can use foods like Land and Lake, which reduces your visibility. Now, to be fair, the game is pretty generous with skill points, and you can of course just respec your character whenever you want, but I think food is a good way to experiment early on without having to go all in. Now, one more bonus scenario where I think food is really useful is in some of the game's timed challenges, like in the hunting grounds or in the arena. These challenges really are tailor-made for food because they're designed to test you in skills and abilities that you probably don't use all that often. So instead of having to invest in a particular skill in order to complete a challenge, or to at least make the challenge a little bit easier, you can augment that skill by using food. For example, the Heavy Weapons trial on Thornmarsh is one of the game's trickier hunting ground trials, but it can be made easier with skills like Heavy Weapon Plus and Heavy Lifter. But if you're having trouble with the trial, you can use a food like the Encrusted Snowbird, which gives you +2 heavy weapons skill. And in the arena, you need all the help you can get. So foods that can help increase your weapon stamina, like Meat in the Middle, Land God's Gift, the Great MRE, or Curd of the Ancestors, are all super useful. As well as foods that help you increase your valor, like Sun King's Delight, Shaved Salted Haunch, and Sio's Banquet. Okay, and by now I'm sure I've convinced you that food is super awesome and you're definitely going to want to start using it. So let's talk about a couple of tips to help you get the most out of it. And first up, since the food names themselves don't actually give you any indication of what the food does or the boost you get, it can be really difficult when sorting through your toolkit to know which food to use. But if you press and hold down on the D-pad like you're gonna craft more of that item, it will give you a summary of the food item as well as the skills that come along with it. And if there's another food you want to try, like sun wings, but you don't have the resources to buy it and you're not exactly sure where to pick up Eastern bird wings, you can create a job, which will show you the nearest location. Now lastly, I want to chat through some things that would make food a little bit more useful, or at the very least a little bit more fun. And hopefully these are some things that we see in Horizon 3. And if you have any ideas for how to improve food or make it better, definitely be sure to let me know in the comments below. But like I mentioned earlier, if the boost you got from food had the ability to stack, that would be the ultimate improvement. Now some would probably argue that this would make the game too easy or would make you too OP, but let's be real, by the end of the game, once you've acquired all the skills in the skill tree, you pretty much are pretty OP anyway. And even with your food pouch fully upgraded, you can only carry 5 food items at a time, so the most you could eat is 5, and the highest level you can get for any skill is 4. So it really doesn't seem like this would give you that much more of an advantage. If anything, I think this would encourage a lot more players to use food, and it would just be a lot of fun to play around with and experiment with a lot of different combinations. And another thing that I think would help encourage more players to use food is if there were legendary foods. All the other item types in the game have legendary versions, so it seems like it would make sense to have some legendary foods as well. As it is, I think a lot of players use food a few times in the beginning, but you get to a certain point in the game where you have your skill tree maxed out, or at least close to it, and food just becomes kind of an afterthought. Having some legendary food available that not only gave you a passive boost and also gave you back health and stamina, but maybe also filled up your Valor bar or increased the length of time where a Valor Surge is active would be really awesome. And lastly, it would be great if we had the ability to cook food at campfires or at least at the different shelters. And I have to imagine that this is something that they thought of and probably just didn't have time to work it into the game because it just makes a lot of sense. And as we've seen from other games, it would potentially give us another collectible as we'd have to go around and collect cookbooks and recipes in order to craft the food at our shelter. Which some would say there are probably too many collectibles in this game already, but hey, personally, I don't mind. I think they're a lot of fun. But this is something that I would be shocked if we didn't see in Horizon 3. Okay, but that is my full and complete breakdown of food in the Forbidden West. What are some scenarios where you find food useful? What are some tips and tricks for players trying to use food? And what are some of your favorite food items? Definitely be sure to let me know in the comments. And also be sure to check out the official Horizon cookbook, Tastes of the 7 Tribes. I've dropped my affiliate link in the description below if you want to check it out. Not only does it help put a couple dollars in my pocket, but hopefully also inspires you with some awesome Horizon themed recipes. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Carrots should be boiled for 5 minutes. I'll boil theirs for 6.